His name is Sylvester Stallone. He's the star of a new film called Rocky. He has been described as handsome, tough, talented, sexy, sensitive, dynamic, and brilliant. He's been compared to Brando, Newman, Pacino, and De Niro. He's been called a top contender for an Academy Award. Sylvester Stallone in Rocky, rated PG.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to CinemArcade. This is the podcast about movies, video games, and the sparks that fly when those two worlds collide. My name is World Heavyweight Champion Steve Gunley. I'm very excited to be introducing a new mini-series on the Rocky films, and it's going to be a lot of fun to talk about. But, of course, I need some help discussing this, and over here in the red corner, wearing black tights and holding some silly putty... Who is it?
You're the one where
this is the part in boxing where the boxer yells their name out really loud after they're being prompted.
J-Ben!
It sounded like you were falling off a cliff. She's fine, everyone. She's fine. There's no cliff here.
They don't know that.
And over here in the green corner, wearing a blue hoodie and playing with a fidget spinner.
Medium weight, Justin Wilhelm.
Whoa! Is everyone ready to rumble? I hope they are, because we're talking about some boxing movies. Boxing, the
Is
most
that where Ready to
cinematic
Rumble
of-
comes from? Boxing?
No. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
I
Absolutely.
think that comes from boxing.
Yeah, it's Michael Buffer.
I've never watched boxing before.
Really?
so-
Okay. Well, you've now watched a boxing movie. And
Yeah.
See, I really love boxing movies, but I don't really find watching like MMA or
Yeah.
like boxing matches very like compelling because I don't like that they're actually getting hurt.
Right. Like,
I'm
I'll play the games,
Yeah.
and in hockey, I'll be like, oh, they're going to fight? Yeah! Because at least in hockey, it's like, I mean, I understand that it's a gentleman's thing in boxing, but in hockey, it's going to last 15 seconds, and then they're going to be done, and then they're just going to play hockey the rest of the night.
Yeah, you just move on with your day.
Yeah.
No, but there is. I'm with you on that, J-Ben. Like, there is something about sports movies that I really connect with, probably because you can filter it down to the narrative that you want to see
Yes.
rather than the narrative you hope you're going to
Well,
see.
it is definitely this fantasy and wish fulfillment. So I just got to watch Roadhouse during South by Southwest.
Oh, I've heard it's kind of good.
It's fun. I don't know. I feel like Connor is super annoying.
Okay,
like
Conor McGregor?
Yeah,
Is he in
like
that?
you know, like because like I feel like you can play like a evil villain like Dolph Lundgren does in Rocky 3,
Four. He's in
4,
four, yeah.
4, and like still be like scary, but like I don't know, like Connor, what's his name, is just sort of unhinged.
Okay.
In the Roadhouse movie, so it sort of works for the movie, but I just don't. I just you get the impression that he's kind of a jerk.
Oh
You know
yeah,
what I mean?
no, I get that. I mean, not to paint with too broad of a brush here, but I get the impression that most people who want to punch other people really hard for a living might have some rage issues that they're working out. It's a possibility. I don't want to generalize because everybody gets into it for different reasons.
And like, I can respect the like techniques and nuance that goes into it. Just from like watching clips. Like, I love every once in a while when a clip pops up of like Mike Tyson training at like 60 years or whatever old he is at this
He's
point.
58 and he's got to fight soon.
And
With Logan Paul, right?
And,
Yeah.
That's
and he
embarrassing.
looks like he would murder me and not break a sweat.
Yeah.
Because he still has it. Like,
he's a tank.
still,
I mean,
Yeah.
he moves so fast, and that's the thing that I always like. That's the part that I appreciate, is like, it's actually a lot of skill in there, but I'm not in it to watch Rocky Balboa take 16 punches around straight to the face unblocked.
Yeah.
So I don't know, like I don't know whether or not this is too early to get into it, but
Sorry, there's a new cat in the house, and he's going to be causing a little chaos. So if we get distracted by cats scrambling around.
Yeah, the dog can't get on top of the cabinets.
Yeah, that's his new favorite place.
I just think it's really interesting that Rocky is the quintessential boxer movie as opposed to Raging Bull. I think that's really interesting.
Well, I think it makes total sense because
Yeah.
Raging Bull is such a depressing, rage-filled movie about a deeply flawed human being, whereas Rocky is just kind of a purely uplifting American underdog story. You know, like it's sweet-natured, it's larger than life, it's kind of buying into this whole American dream, and it's been a weirdly consistent and strong series. Like since 1976, it's been going for a long time. It's had multiple iterations, but it's stayed pretty strong. Like even the worst Rocky movie is still pretty good.
Yeah.
And that's pretty impressive.
I just want to point out something adorable that just happened. Your cat just reached up and touched the ceiling and then just was like, all right, I did it. I can do this.
Just wanted to make sure it was there. Yeah, no, it was all good. Yeah, but so we are starting a new miniseries this week with Rocky, but now there are 9 Rocky movies in total.
We're going to watch all 9.
We're only going to watch 3, but I think it kind of worked out well, the 3 that we hit, because I think if you watch the 3 that we're going to be watching, you're going to get a pretty different impression of what the Rocky series is compared to if you watched the whole series. We're going with Rocky 1, Rocky Balboa from 2006, and Creed, the first Creed movie. Those are the 3 kind of most grounded, most indie-minded, most kind of a small-scale movies.
Well, and
in
I
the
definitely
series.
think that those are the right ones to do, but at the same time, I'm really sad that I'm not going to have an excuse to watch Rocky 3 and 4.
I mean, that's the thing. Okay, those movies, Rocky 3 and 4, they get silly. And it's amazing that this series can kind of keep one foot in both realms. You know, they can keep the one foot in like the rough and tumble, like working class indie movie vibe, and they can have over the top characters named Thunder Lips, played by Hulk Hogan, that they need to like battle in the ring. Like he has a training robot in part 4.
I remember the robot.
I mean, that's how silly. That's about as silly as the series gets. But they always manage to bring it back.
There's a kidnapping in one of them, right?
No,
No,
I
you're
don't think
thinking
so.
of Commando.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
Same movie.
They're so similar.
Yeah.
I didn't know.
Arnold Schwarzenegger in Commando.
This is, excuse me, his name is John Matrix. Thank you. John Matrix. Yeah, they changed their name on Ellis Island to Matrix, which is what I wish I could have done. But yeah, let's talk a little bit about the Rocky series, because I think this is an interesting way to approach these movies. So for those, if you've only become familiar with the series by reputation or for like its 80s output, it may surprise you how really, really small and quiet this original movie is, and how little boxing there actually is in this movie. But it's one of the great underdog stories of cinema, not just in its story, but also in the way that it came about. And it all starts with Sylvester Stallone. Obviously, Stallone is a household name now, but in the early 70s, he was a struggling young actor who didn't really fit kind of anywhere. You know, he's a very muscular guy. He suffered some severe facial paralysis at birth that left half of his face numb. So, you know, that's why he has that distinctive speech pattern. And he found himself just only because of his size and because of his look, he found himself only being cast as like villains, you know, or thugs or heavies, henchmen, things like that. And he really struggled to make a living for a while. He was homeless off and on, you know, he was living on park benches. And what is happening? Are you getting attacked by a dog?
I'm petting Rivet, and I'm guessing based on where Rivet's head is that he's licking J-Ban's feet right now.
My
Why
God.
does he love my feet?
I don't know. I've been wrestling with that question. I don't know. Rivet, get out of here, you little jerk. Sorry, this is going to be an animal-dominated episode.
Which is very fair for a Rocky movie. There's lots
actually
of
is.
animals in the Rocky
Well,
He
movie.
loves animals.
Can I just point out?
Yeah,
He gets a dog.
he does.
Where the fuck's the dog go?
He has a dog. He keeps a dog.
Yeah, but the dog's not mentioned the rest of the movie.
You don't have to like
need
show
to.
the dog off
He
all the
goes
time.
on runs, no dog. They do
That's an
shots
old
in his
dog.
apartment, no dog.
It's an old dog. It's an
Like
old dog.
as soon as he gets
That
the
dog's
dog,
just laying down.
He gets the
There's-
dog late in the movie, though.
there's a
so we don't-
sequence of scenes where he goes running with the dog, and then the dog is never again shown.
I think he reasonably deducted that dog was not a running dog. That dog was not a running dog.
It's not a running
That's
dog,
fair.
especially for the velocity and the training that he was doing. But that dog actually plays into the origin stories of this movie. Okay, so Stallone, like I said, he's intermittently homeless. He's taking any jobs he can. He does a movie in the early 70s. I don't know if you're familiar with this. It's called The Party at Kitty and Stud's. He plays Stud, and it's a softcore erotic film.
Okay.
He did not participate in any of the sex scenes. They were all like stock footage, but his very first film is an erotic film. After Rocky was a success, they retitled it Italian Stallion and released it into porno theaters with heavier cuts in it. So there's been this urban legend that Sylvester Stallone was in a porno for a long time, which is technically true.
So they basically bought softcore porn and then wrote a movie around it.
Yeah. Kinda,
and none of the actors are the same. What?
No, well, no. It's a movie about like a guy who's so ultra virile that he has a party at his house and everybody wants to bang him, and he didn't participate in any actual like on-camera sex scenes or anything, but they took stock footage from other movies and cut it into it to make it look like it is. That was pretty common back in the day. But he was taking roles like that. He was in movies like Death Race 2000 and lots of little small wordless parts. And he wanted to play something a little more heroic. So he wrote the screenplay for Rocky in 3 days after seeing a boxing match, and he envisioned it as kind of a breakout starring vehicle for himself. And it's worth noting that now it's pretty common. Like if an actor wants to kind of break out, you write your own movie, you cast yourself in it, and you hope it's a hit. You know, it's a pretty common story. At this time, that really didn't happen. Like it had happened to Orson Welles, it happened to Charlie Chaplin, but those guys were already pretty established theater guys. And Stallone was just kind of a nobody. So there was no real reason for people to pay attention to him. But he was friends with Henry Winkler, who had become a breakout star thanks to Happy Days. He's the Fonz. They had done a movie together.
Oh, right.
And so Henry Winkler helped him shop the script around. And originally it sold to a TV station. They were going to make it into a TV miniseries. Stallone begged for them not to do it, and then they rejected the script and sent it back to him. It got so bad for him at one point that he had to give his dog, his beloved dog, to his friend to watch out for them because he couldn't afford to feed him and the dog. And then 2 days later, this movie got picked up by MGM. He got a nice payday out of it. He got to be the star, and the first thing he did was go back and free that dog, pay to get the dog back, and that is the dog that appears in this film. So that's just kind of a nice little nod. That was Stallone's actual dog that he had to get rid of and then immediately got back. So naturally, the studio wanted a more conventional movie star to be in this role originally. All right, they offered it to Burt Reynolds. They offered it to Robert Redford. These are guys who make sense for a movie like this.
Burt Reynolds?
They're too beautiful.
That's the thing. Like these were like the conventional leading men of this time. These were like the pretty boys. You know, that's kind of the weird thing about the 70s. They were all either like super pretty, like you got your Warren Beatty or your Robert Redford or guys like this, or they were like Woody Allen and Elliot Gould, you know, Donald Sutherland. Like the 70s were weird in that regard. Gene Hackman, you know, like guys who were just very, very unconventional. But, you know, Stallone stuck to his guns, and he was able to land the lead role of the part. He was able to convince them that he's the only one who could play this part the way it was written. And this would, of course, springboard his career into being one of the biggest movie stars that we've ever had.
Yeah.
You know, for 50 years. The guy is still at it. He's been one of the biggest stars in the world for decades now. And this movie was a massive, massive hit. Roger Ebert, in his review, he said Stallone was the heir apparent to Marlon Brando. And we don't really think about Stallone as an actor anymore, you know? Like, and that's a rude thing to say, but like most of what we think about for Stallone is big, sweaty, muscly action movies where he's like quipping one-liners and throwing like grenades at people, you know,
playing the same character every movie.
But he is wonderful in this movie and in this part in general. Like you can tell this part is very, very special to him, and I think he's just so naturalistic and odd. I definitely see the Brando comparisons. I kept thinking of Brando and On the Waterfront throughout this whole movie, which no doubt was like one of the guiding lights of this performance. But just in everything from his mannerisms to the way that he's just like constantly talking. It seems like a stream of consciousness sometimes, some of the things that come out of his mouth. Like, he's not a terribly bright guy, but he's sweet and he means well, and he's
very vulnerable.
He's very vulnerable.
Yes.
He is.
He's super, super vulnerable, and the shots linger on him just getting defeated by life and feeling like shit.
And just being like slightly awkward.
Yeah.
In like normal, believable ways.
He's
of
punchy.
like
He's been a boxer for a couple years now. He's a little punchy, yeah.
And then they tie that up with also him having moments where he gets frustrated. Maybe he gets a little loud, but he never gets like. He very, very rarely gets like actually angry.
Yeah. No.
Like especially with like his friends and Adrian, who is his love interest.
He gets
like,
angry at himself.
There's one point where he was kind of frustrated and snapped a little bit at Adrian.
Yeah.
And after sitting quietly for about 10 seconds, he then gets up and apologizes.
Yeah. Well, we see a lot of moments like that. Like he's got this big kind of screaming tirade against Mickey after Mickey showed up and asked to be his manager. And then we just see the next scene. He's just wordlessly, like, he goes back out. We don't need to see that dialogue exchange. We know that Rocky feels bad. He's got a good heart, and he brings him back.
Yeah,
into the fold.
and it's like,
and that always comes across. And also, like, while his life isn't ideal, Rocky is never like self-pitying, and he's never like a sad sack. You know, he's keeping his dream alive, but like he also. He's kind of he knows he's getting to the end of this chapter of his life. He's sort of at this crossroads where it's like, am I just going to be the thug for the local loan shark, or is something going to happen with me?
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I thought was nice was oftentimes characters in similar roles, positions as Rocky, of being like, oh, you know, like they're the bouncer, they're the loan shark, thug, or whatever. You see the temper come out and the violence come out.
Yeah.
And they very quickly establish Rocky as someone who, for a kind of a loud boxer who's very frustrated all the time for relatively fair reasons.
Oh yeah.
He's very violence averse. He's told, hey, go collect this money or break his thumb, and the guy gives him $130, $70 short, and he still doesn't. He just basically he makes his point.
He doesn't want to. He doesn't want to break anybody's.
But
thumbs,
he doesn't
you know?
make his point by like he grabs him, holds on to him. I think he technically like pushes him up against the wall.
Yeah.
And then that's the extent of it. He doesn't threaten any violence other than saying, I was told, get the money or break your thumb. The guy even tries to like give him the coat and stuff, and he's just like, no, get the money. Like,
right. Yeah, exactly.
He even gets chewed out for doing it.
Yeah.
And it just kind of shows he's got the heart inside.
And he's at that crossroads, you know, where he's trying to figure it out. And then, you know, a lot of this movie does hinge on this kind of fortuitous sort of bolt out of the blue event. But it is that's kind of the whole point. You know, it's this shot in the dark. Like, this is the guy that nobody ever believed in. I mean, so many movies have been. You know, look, Rocky didn't invent this formula, and it certainly was not the last. But I think a lot of movies that we see now, especially sports movies, pretty much every sports movie made since Rocky owes a little something to Rocky.
Yeah, of course.
Right? Like,
and the rags to riches story is something that, you know, it's been since ancient Greece.
Oh,
but
yeah.
Like,
Oh,
it's such it's done so perfectly in Rocky. And it's just like they spend a lot of time showing him down and out, but still worthy.
Yeah.
Yes, that is exactly what I was thinking without being able to say it. Was there's never points where you look at his behavior, you look at what he's doing, and you go, I don't think he deserves to have, you know, a way up.
No, and the screenwriter is Stallone. You know, he does some smart little things to help it. You know, like filling his house with not just animals, but kind of like oddly unlovable animals. Like, these are not cuddly animals. He has turtles and he has fish. He's got like, but he cares for them and he's excited about these turtles, and he's very excited about this girl. And you know, people tend to think of this as a sports movie, as a boxing movie, and really there's very little actual boxing
it's like
in
10
this
minutes.
film. You know, when we think of Rocky, it's those big climactic fight scenes, or it's the training montages, right?
So it's so interesting because, like, I don't know, as we get older and we, like, culture changes, like, when I was a child, I thought this was one of the most romantic movies I'd ever seen. As an adult, it's a little iffy.
Yeah.
But
Okay,
at the same
yeah.
time, I'm really, like, I love the fact that she's the same age as him.
Yeah.
That she has her own strengths and weaknesses. That she is a fully fleshed out character. Like, I like, you know, he's very obviously like, the very first time I saw this kiss, like, when I probably was like, I don't know, like a kid, I was like, that's one of the most romantic kisses I've ever seen, and my entire life. And one of the reasons why it comes across as so romantic is evidently both of them had fevers.
Oh no! So they're all sweaty.
They both had the flu at the time when they were filming it, and so they were both like, oh, that's why their cheeks are flushed, and it looks so romantic. Like, now, like, it's a little 70s. It doesn't age 100% well, but I still
don't know.
feel like she's choosing to be with him.
Yeah,
She is. Here, my thing with this. Okay, so we're talking, of course, about his relationship with Adrian, played by Talia Shire, in a really lovely performance, I think.
Oh, she's so good.
So good.
And the way she blossoms, like, they both blossom in this relationship.
Absolutely. The crucial line comes from Rocky, like, a little bit after they start dating. Paulie, Burt Young, is kind of giving him shit. It's like, what do you see in her? And his answer is so sweet and so perfect. He just says, we fill each other's gaps.
Yeah.
She's got gaps, I got gaps, we fill each other's gaps. They sense that from the beginning. So there is an element of this date. There's a long, protracted, like, date sequence in the middle of this movie. That's
Which
just
is so beautiful.
It's just a delight.
Like, it's so good.
We follow the entire date from, like, beginning to end, and, like, Rocky is so garrulous, and he's just chatting, just, like, completely unembarrassed. And Adrian is so painfully shy. She's been beaten down her whole life. She's the meekest, most quiet girl, but she really likes Rocky. So there is a little bit of that 70s ick of, like, you know, maybe he's not respecting consent or something a little bit, but
Well,
she also needs the push.
It's the 70s perspective that her going up to his room was consent, and, like, so, like, that's it's a little bit of an ick, but at the same time, like, I don't know, these. I feel like she was 100% there for him, and I like the fact that he takes his shirt off and he's like, "Look at me, I'm pretty." You know what I mean? Like, and it's really
it's something that she is protesting out of propriety, I guess, out of this perception, like, because Paulie is a really shitty brother to her. Like, I love Burt Young. I love this performance, and he does.
It's a terrific performance.
He does.
He's such a shitbag.
He does soften as the series goes on, because Paulie stays with the series for, like, the rest of it. You know, we only lost Burt Young a few months ago, just before Carl Weathers. Sadly, we lost both of them within a few months of each other, but. Yeah, he softens a lot. In this movie, he is clearly just, like, he hates his life. He hates what it's become. He's an alcoholic, and he's really, like, self-destructive, but he also takes a lot out on Adrian, which is so hard to watch.
Yes.
Especially for Rocky. Like, this is his best friend, and he has to just kind of sit and like, listen to this abuse being slung at his
another
girlfriend.
Production, it was such a low-budget production, they had to keep throwing out the same turkey over and over again. For every take.
Oh.
Yeah.
So it just gets worse and worse.
What kind of douchebag throws away a perfectly good turkey?
He's such an asshole, you know, and, like, it is one of those things that kind of makes him seem irredeemable, especially because when we leave when we leave him off at the end of the movie, Paulie's just kind of, like, using Rocky as a springboard to fame and success, and that is sort of a thing he does for the rest of the series, but it's more playful, I think, as it goes on.
I think it is more
as Steve gets up to stop the cat from.
You don't have to editorialize the cat situation.
Almost got away with it, Justin.
He's so cute.
Yeah, he
is a very cute cat.
His name's Gonzo. He's a good guy.
Now that we've derailed and yet another pet story, but yeah, like, what I wanted to say, like, I feel like the whole sequence of Rocky slowly courting Adrian is something that I really love. Like, he sees her every night and every morning, and he's like, he quotes himself in the mirror and he makes up jokes for her, and it's just like it's very endearing. And at
It's
this,
very old-timey, like, courtship idea.
it is. It's very old-timey, and like to see the way that Adrian, like, she has a full story arc. She blossoms. She gets more fashionable.
Yeah.
I don't know if she needed those glasses, but she decided she didn't need to wear them all the time.
It was a real she's all that moment
Yeah.
prior to she's all that. It's
Yeah.
like, oh, you were beautiful because you don't wear glasses. We're all glasses wearers at this table, and we're I object to that whole sentiment.
3 different colors.
I look dramatically worse without glasses. I know that for a fact. So yeah, you can suck it, Rocky.
Hey, Clark Kent stands for us all.
Exactly.
One of the things that I thought I really liked and that really like showed the relationship was as somebody who's neurodivergent and who in situations like that might be more on the Rocky side of like they go ice skating and Rocky kind of cuts a deal with the guy who's about to like close up shop, basically of like, hey, look, 10 minutes, let us skate.
Yeah.
And she's very quiet. She's like responding, but short responses, not very often. And Rocky's mostly just kind of talking and filling the space. And at one point he says, am I talking too loud? And she goes, no, it's fine. Like,
Yeah.
She kind of assures him of like, no, this is good.
Yeah.
And I think you're
Like-
exactly right. Like this is kind of a neurodivergent personality being depicted before we really had a word for that. Like, you know, she was just kind of being relegated to being shy or being a spinster, you know. But truthfully, she probably has.
Because, dear God, she was almost 30.
Oh God, burn her. I mean, you know, but she probably would be like on some kind of spectrum today, you know, or at least we would recognize that she has some pretty crippling anxiety or something like that.
Yeah.
You know, and there just wasn't like a thing for that. And especially in this very gruff Philadelphia neighborhood where she's growing up and the family she's growing up in, there's not going to be a lot of sympathy for that. And so that's just one more thing that makes Rocky so endearing as a human being, just that he sees her, he gets her, he's not making her feel bad at all that she's not talking, which is, I think, the crucial thing there. He's never being like, hey, why don't you speak up or anything like that. He's like, I am just going to talk. I'm going to trust that if you don't like what I'm saying, you're going to tell me to shut up.
Yeah. I'm going to ask a lot of questions that might be rhetorical.
Yeah.
And you
I'll
can
tell you
answer
about
it if you want to.
I'll tell you about my boxing. I got a wallet full of my photos of my fights. How cute is that?
It was really funny
It's
that
really
both
charming.
him and Mickey also has a whole
Some photos
of
and-
his
yeah.
of his
Such a amazing. So Burgess Meredith also, like, just he really kind of popped off of this movie. He's obviously a theater legend. He was known as playing the Penguin in the original Batman series. Like, he was you know, he was an established guy, but this kind of recontextualized him. And Mickey is such an indelible character. I just love that whole interaction between the two of them, where Mickey kind of comes hat in hand and asks to be his manager. He's like, look, I should have trained you back then. I didn't, but this is our, you know, we really feel that, like, this is his one last shot.
Yeah.
He's a guy who's always gotten close but never got
And
there.
I think another important part in their relationship is that this is not quite immediately following, but pretty close following a kind of an argument that they had where Rocky was complaining to Mickey of like, hey, look, you haven't, what's the deal? You've always kind of treated me like shit. You've never really given me the time of day. What's going on? And then he speaks up and says, yeah, because you had talent, you had the opportunity to be something, and you were muscle for a loan shark.
Yeah.
And like kind of like that level of like, yeah, I lost respect for you when you started doing that. And
Yeah.
that's why I've been pretty, you know, short with you and not really giving you chances.
Yeah, and he you know, Rocky held on this bit of a grudge. They've always kind of had this thing, and then they just forge over this course of the series like such an incredible relationship, and it's really, it just all starts here. And you know, we've talked this long about the movie without really going into any of the actual boxing details or talking about Apollo Creed, fucking Carl Weathers, a former professional football player. I think he had just recently retired at this point, but he's also a classically trained dramatic actor. So like what a jackpot that guy is.
Yeah.
You know, he shows up with that physique and that presence, and he's also a good actor. You know, like R.I.P. Carl Weathers, man. That was a huge loss.
You can feel the charisma in like the first scene.
Yes.
Of like, oh, okay. And then like he's always surrounded by people. And while at times he definitely comes off as a bit showboaty, he also doesn't come off as like a shitty person either.
Yeah, no, like he's the champion of the world. That involves some cockiness.
Yeah.
Which, and so like he earned where he's at, but it doesn't seem to be like, you never really see him treating anybody like shit. The worst he ever gets is when one of his folks is watching Rocky train. Yeah. And I think it's one of the same guys that was by him at the ring.
Could be. Yeah, he's got a whole crew.
Yeah.
I mean...
and he just kind of dismisses not the guy, but really just dismissing Rocky of like, he's just a guy we picked. Like, I'm not that concerned.
Well, it's a really great physical performance, too, because we see all of that insecurity come out in Apollo Creed in round one of the fight. Not before. It's not until he's like dancing around acting a fool and Rocky clocks him. And we see him scared for the first time in that moment. Just like, oh shit, okay, this guy might give me a little trouble.
Yeah.
And it's not conveyed in words. It's just conveyed in Weathers' face as he's kind of staggering around the ring. And just in the like, this is really, really smart visual filmmaking. I think this is a movie I always kind of downgraded in my head. I saw it when I was a kid. It didn't make a super huge impression because for a lot of the same reasons we're talking about, I was expecting like a rough and tumble, like manly boxing movie, and so much of it is a quieter, like smarter little examination of this lower working class life.
It's slower paced than you would expect. Shots go on a little longer than you would expect. And every time it does, there's a reason. And it's usually showing you either some like lingering emotion.
The director, like I don't remember who the director is.
John G. Avildsen directed this. He also is known for The Karate Kid. So he's got two huge like sports movies under his belt and a lot of unremarkable films as well. But this is, I think, the last time for a while that anybody but Stallone directs. Stallone takes over as director for 2, 3, and 4, and then I think Avildsen comes back for 5, and then Stallone is back for Rocky Balboa. So, like, but this was a movie I saw when I was young. I never really pursued the rest of the series, and then I've revisited all of these a couple times since. And man, this is a movie that just grows for me every time I watch it. This is probably the 5th or 6th time I watched it, and I always just appreciate a little bit more how good it is, not just as an underdog story or as like this generator of all these tropes that we've come so familiar with, but just as a movie that's capturing a specific time, specific place with very real lived-in characters. And just as a work of filmmaking, I think this movie is fantastic.
Philadelphia is a character in this movie.
Oh yeah, it's been said so many times, but this is such a Philly movie. Absolutely, yeah, this is an amazing Philly movie. So much so that the stairs, the top of the stairs of the Philadelphia Museum now has a Rocky statue there. Like,
that's cool.
I think too many people were trying to recreate that shot, but what an amazing shot too. There's just something that Rocky manages to do that's so incredible. Like every movie does follow that formula.
I was trying to think about training montages before Rocky, and I'm just like, I know there were some, but it's just that the Rocky is like in the indelible training montage. Yeah, because it's not just one. There's a couple of different like training scenarios, like him punching the beef.
Iconic. Yeah,
which is so iconic, cracking the ribs, but him do like when he starts off and he runs and he can barely, and he gets cramps and stuff, and you're like,
eggs.
He's like nearly crying when he gets to the museum,
which we all identify with.
Oh yeah,
not me, but hey, whatever. No, not true.
No, I expected again a big macho movie. More actiony, more like man. Yeah. And then we've been saying this whole time, but really, Rocky's a big softie.
He is.
There's some macho bits here and there, but most of the time it's just Rocky being Rocky, And most of Rocky being Rocky is Rocky trying to figure out who Rocky is, what Rocky's going to be.
A lot of this training montage works for a couple of reasons too. Firstly, we have Stallone himself, who is an amazing, he doesn't get credit for being an amazing physical presence on screen, especially at this time. People did not look like Stallone. We're used to seeing that super jacked, action hero body.
It's called steroids.
Yeah. Where you see he even looks like a little slimmer in this movie. But yeah.
No, compare him to being in Rambo 2 or Rocky 4.
He claims Rocky 3, I think, is the hardest he's ever trained and it's the best shape he's ever been in his life. So it got pretty ridiculous. It's still somewhat attainable in this movie, but even still, he's just this brick shithouse of a man who convincingly gets stronger and fast. And that's the thing too. He's also fast as hell. So we really get to see a lot of that, which is really impressive. And then secondly, in these montages, we have Bill Conti's Gotta Fly Now. We've got that amazing song that's playing, which a patently ridiculous song.
Yeah,
if you listen to the
so
lyrics,
well in the movie.
It's just every once in a while, a chorus is chiming in saying what he's doing, getting strong now, running fast now.
Oh, this is
making waffles now.
The theme,
going to bed now.
So there's this song, and then there's the Rocky theme that is they play when they're sad. He's the
piano.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and
which is basically the same thing, just in a different key or whatever. I'm not a music person, but it's the same progression.
Yeah, it's built out on the same. It's all Bill Conti, which is just an amazing score. And weirdly, the Rocky series is always synonymous with music in some way or another.
Yeah.
I mean, we get Eye of the Tiger with Rocky 3, and my favorite is Hearts on Fire from Rocky 4, which is just an amazing training montage there. But it's this series that manages to feel both grounded and mythic at the same time. It helps that you give these characters these ridiculous names.
Yeah.
Well, it's also he's such a, to quote Rocky, a bum. He's a bum. He's working for shady people.
Yeah. He's
everyone in the neighborhood he just thinks that he has no social cachet.
No.
They think he's a washed up fighter and that's all he's ever going to be. And he doesn't have any redeeming qualities. And it's such a harsh community.
Yeah.
Because he's trying to show that he's he helps people who he helps that drunk into the bar, and he hangs out, and he's friends with Paulie, and he even said once during the show, Paulie's a good man.
Nah,
maybe not, but he sees the potential in him, and they are lifelong best friends, and then he's got that moment he lectures that girl who's he gives her that long lecture as they're walking for being potty mouth, he's clearly,
he has great intentions.
He does. He has a lot of good intentions. He's never really lost his optimism, despite growing up in this situation he's grown up in.
I think the moment that captures that the best is he goes and he sees the arena where this fight is going to happen. That is going to be potentially the biggest thing he'll ever do in his life.
Well, and also life endangering, because he's the heavyweight champion. This is him putting his body, his mind, his brain, on the line for an opportunity.
Yeah. He can get really, really hurt here. Yeah.
He comes home and he's talking to Adrian about, look, I don't think I can do it. I don't think I can beat him. And then instead of his alternative option being, I'm not going to do it, I'm going to call it off, it's, if I can't beat him, I'm at least going to last all 15 rounds.
So is this your first time watching this, Justin?
Yes.
Okay, so this is your first time watching this. Before watching this, were you under the impression that Rocky won the big fight at the end of this?
Yeah. At the very least that it tilted in his direction.
Okay.
I was surprised when it was, I think, slightly against his favor when they did the voting. I don't know how that works.
He lost.
Yeah.
He loses the fight, but it's a triumphant moment nonetheless. I think that's such a cool choice.
It's a triumphant moment because Adrian and them say that I love you.
And no one's ever gone the distance with Apollo. Apollo knocks everybody out in 3 rounds, and he went 12.
He went 15.
Oh, excuse me, 15.
Not only that, but he also knocked down Apollo, which apparently had also not been
never
done
happened.
yet. And so he didn't win, but he, going into it, didn't expect to win. But he absolutely showed maybe I'm not the best boxer, maybe I'm not the world heavyweight champion, but I'm not no one.
No.
Like I'm capable of going up there and standing my claims and trying for it.
It's a great way to keep the character kind of grounded while still giving him this hugely triumphant moment and making him like showing definitively that this guy's got the goods. I think for me personally, the weakest one in the whole franchise for me is Rocky 2. Just because I think Rocky 2 is trying to do this same movie over again, including having him rematch Apollo Creed and then win this time. Like, you know, so
Spoiler.
it's kind of, sorry about this, spoiling a movie from 1979. I apologize. But I think that just makes it a little weaker. There is some good stuff in Rocky 2, especially with him kind of coming to terms with being rich and famous all of a sudden and not really knowing how to handle that limelight. That's an interesting area to explore. But this one, like, it still manages to keep into those, to stay in those roots, and having the big moment, final moment, be between Rocky and Adrian at the end is just selling that this really is a love story between these two people.
One of the things that I liked, and I think we've been so spoiled in movies that do more than this, and oftentimes it's not worth it in the sense of like it takes away from it. But they have this moment as the fight is ending where they're literally like hugging and like kissing and saying I love you while the result is being announced.
Yeah.
And then it goes to credits. It doesn't do the, you know, day after or whatever, which oftentimes when it gets done, it's like sometimes you get that closure and you're like, yeah, but a lot of times it ends up being the weakest point of the movie and you're just like, I don't know if we needed that. And it cut at like the perfect point of where you feel that triumphantness. You feel he's accomplished it. He's done well. Like this is great.
Yeah.
And then that's what they leave you with.
Yeah. I think it's just so perfectly measured, and I think, you know, this is absolutely considered one of the great movies. Look, it won Best Picture in 1976. It's on the AFI film list. It usually, you know, when critics are making lists of great movies, this one's great American movies, at least this one's usually mentioned. But it's kind of weirdly seen as sort of a softer great movie, you know, like people are like, yeah, okay, it's like E.T., you know, yeah, it's a great movie, but yeah, that thing's pretty cheesy and out of date, and like this movie does not feel cheesy to me.
No, it doesn't feel cheesy at all.
I think part of that comes from, and it might just be us, I think we spend a lot of time as neurodivergent people or around neurodivergent people, that when we see the cheesiness happening, we're looking at it and we're going, all right, that's just because of who the character is, right?
Yeah.
Like Rocky is cheesy here and there.
Yeah.
However, that's not because they're trying hard. That's just because, again, Rocky has this string of consciousness thing where he just kind of goes and talks, and it's not always going to be, you know, masterpiece Shakespearean.
No, he drops
lines.
things that just don't make sense sometimes, just because like he's filling the space. But you gotta love watching him just as he walks around the neighborhood. Like every once in a while, he'll just shadow box to himself. Like he's just so in it. Like he's so single-minded in his dream and everything. And so it just gives us so many reasons to root for him. It's just such a heartwarming movie overall. I think I just enjoy it every time I watch it.
And it really sells the underdog as well. Because if Rocky was a fairly normal person and all these same things were happening to him, you wouldn't feel as much about it. But the fact that Rocky is a character, like a unique individual. I say unique, but like we all can see pieces of other people we know.
Sure.
Like it's a very believable character.
Well, and the fact that
that really sets up that kind of underdog.
And the fact that it's mirroring what's happening to Stallone in real life as well, like where he went from like this bum nobody that was never going to make it to being the biggest movie star in the world for 50 years is like, you know, it gives it a little gravitas. Whatever you may think of Stallone, his later career or anything else, like you do have to respect that he was able to pull this off and that he was able to.
Will we ever do Demolition Man?
Oh, we sure will. There's a run in the 90s of Stallone movies we're going to do. Cliffhanger, Judge Dredd, Demolition Man. There's a few of those that we're going to be doing. So
get them claws out.
I think we should transition to the video games here because there's a lot to talk about with these games as well.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Rocky, the video game. It was released November 12th, 2002. It's developed by Rage Newcastle and published by Ubisoft, and it's released on GameCube, PS2, Game Boy Advance, and we played it on the Xbox. Now, there are surprisingly few games based on this franchise, given that, well, like... The rise of 8-bit games and the popularity of the Rocky sequels share a considerable chunk of the same diagram, like Venn diagram, you know, like Rocky 4, which is the series' most profitable, most successful film, came out kind of right when NES was hitting really big. And one of the biggest games on the NES and one of the best games on the NES was directly inspired by Rocky, and that's Mike Tyson's Punch-Out. Yeah. You know, which is following that same formula of having these larger-than-life, like, goofily named characters and this little tiny underdog guy who has to fight his way up to the top. That game even has, like, training montage sequences inspired by Rocky. So it's strange that there weren't more, or that there weren't, like, games that were just reskinned versions of Punch-Out with Rocky. Like, the Rocky games that we got all felt very different from that.
Yeah.
Now, technically, the first Rocky game we got was 1983. It was called Rocky Super Action Boxing for the ColecoVision, and that corresponded with the release of Rocky 3. I decided to omit it from this series just to kind of keep it concise, and plus, like, there just wouldn't be a lot to talk about with that game. You know, it's always fun to rewatch Rocky 3. I recommend it. It's really fun. But it didn't feel like there was enough to hang our hat on that, and that so many of these games are based on Rocky as a series more than Rocky like a specific one. So I opted to omit that one. But if people are really incensed, we can watch Rocky 3. But really, the first proper Rocky game that we saw that we played a little bit of was Rocky for the Sega Master System in 1987, a console that does not come up much on this show. Were y'all familiar with the Master System?
I've heard about it.
Okay.
I've heard of it.
Yeah, so it was kind of Sega's original competitor to the NES. It's an 8-bit system. It was not super popular over here, but it is weirdly a long-lived system because...
It was really popular in the UK.
Really popular in the UK, super popular in Korea, and it's extremely popular in Brazil. Okay, a very specific market, because there are certain markets that Nintendo, for whatever reason, some licensing issues or legal issues, they couldn't sell their consoles in. Brazil is one of those countries that was not allowed to have Nintendo products for a long time. So the Sega Master System, I think they were still releasing games for the Master System well into the late 90s, early 2000s in Brazil, most of which will never get released here. But it was a long-lasting system. Either way, this is the first time we played on this show. We played the Rocky game for that. I was a little confused about how this game worked, but I will say it looks really pretty, and it established a formula that continues on to the Xbox
And I fucking
games.
Owned this game.
We have to say right from the top, J-Ban was kind of owning Bones this entire... I think you found your genre.
Well, no, I've always been good at boxing games. Like, I've always been good at them.
Well, we'll get into a little bit of your methodology in a moment.
Well, no, that other one, because this for the little game, it was just basically like a punch, like doing B 3 times and then switching to A, and that's all you had to do.
Yeah. No, it's very button mashy. I mean, this game looks great. Like, the pixels are really large and bright and colorful. But I was having a hard time telling what button was corresponding to what action. And I think that was kind of a persistent issue with the rest of the series.
Yeah, that's true.
Like, where it's always frustrating for me. I think I struggled to get into boxing games that are not Punch-Out or wrestling games for the same reason that I never fully feel like I'm in control of it. You know, I feel like I am squeezing the controller and I'm mashing buttons and I'm pressing things and I'm hoping something good will happen. But unlike something like I can play Mortal Kombat or Super Smash Brothers and feel like I'm...
It was consistent.
It's consistent and it's tight. And like, I feel like if I press down X, I know exactly what's going to happen in Mortal Kombat. I don't necessarily know what's going to happen with an old Sega Master System game. That being said, there are cute little training sequences in between where you have to punch speed bags or punch a boxing bag. And then you just kind of jump right into the action fighting Apollo Creed. And J-Ban did really, really well at this. Yep. And I was struggling kind of figuring out what to do. Because sometimes, like, you press a button and Rocky will just duck. And it's like, Is ducking allowed in boxing? Like getting down, like all the way down? Like, I don't know. It feels like it's not allowed.
I mean, I think it is.
I think it is.
Like
Yeah,
dropping to your knees? I don't know. Are you not? I feel like you're not supposed to.
I mean,
touch
I
the
feel like if
ground.
you don't know what you're doing, it's probably a bad time.
Oh
but-
yeah, I mean, he was like, to be clear, he was crouching. Like he wasn't just like ducking. He was getting all the way down to the ground. Not a whole lot to say about Master System Rocky, really. It was,
It's pretty.
It's pretty.
It's pretty,
fun
like it's
enough.
fun. I could have played it for a couple of hours. It was really nifty.
Yeah.
As opposed to the Xbox one.
Well, yeah, let's talk about this Xbox one because
Oh, man.
I think we might have some split opinions on this
So
one.
I had forgotten. So for a long time, I had a hate relationship with the Xbox controller
Oh,
because it's so fucking big
It
and my
is
hands are so
huge.
small.
Yeah.
And like there was some very comical button mashing on my side, but it was
All
just
right,
like
I need to clarify. This is not button mashing. This was controller squeezing. This was you had your palm over the 4 face buttons and you were squeezing your hand like you were taking your blood pressure.
Well,
and it was working.
and I beat you,
beat my
didn't
ass
I?
handily. I
Oh,
was
yeah.
like, oh, there's no way this will work. And you're just crunch, 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 and you just smashed me to death.
well, it was just like my thumb is like the distance for my thumb to go from 1 to 1 to 1 to 1 is ridiculous. I have a tiny thumb.
It's true.
Look at this thumb.
It's tiny. It's tiny.
your
And
thumb-
these are the improved
compare
Xbox controllers.
Is mine bigger?
Your thumb
You've
is
got the angle.
significantly bigger
Slightly
than mine.
bigger. I think I've got
Slightly bigger? Look at that.
Do I have the biggest thumb?
the longest thumb.
I have the
think.
tiniest
You
thumb.
definitely have the
Yeah,
longest
I've got a
thumb.
long thumb.
Your
but it's
thumb
not
looks like a pinky.
Yeah, I see. Now I'm self-conscious about this. I never noticed this at all about myself. But
Well,
yeah,
that's how you're good at gaming.
Do you have an
There you
extra
go.
ligament there? or-
probably. Yeah. I'm part of Charles Xavier's X-Men. You know, I've got all kinds of mutations going on.
So just for the listeners, I have the tiniest, petitest thumb.
Yes, she's delicate like a glass ballerina.
Like
For the record.
for the record.
But either way, this glass ballerina was throwing fucking haymakers in the Rocky video game.
Well, it's like it's not just buttons because you have to have good rhythm to do a
Yes.
boxing
You do.
game, and like it was really interesting. The block was was hindering throwing punches, which I
Sure,
thought was a good move on
not-
the method of the developers. But it was really interesting because you never did know when you were gonna land a hit or not, which I guess is what happens in real life.
yeah, so this game is not going for like a punch out or, punch out is ultimately, when you break it down, it's more of a puzzle game than a sports game. It's about recognizing tells and knowing when to hit which combo.
Yeah.
This is going for more of like a Knockout Kings style version of like boxing realism. So you've got your body blows, you've got a jab and a straight for your body blows and a jab and a straight for your head blows, and you can modify it with the trigger or with up and down commands for different attacks.
That's how you get like uppercuts and hooks and stuff.
So it's
And
just about looking for weaknesses and exploiting them, and it feels a little closer to like a boxing simulator than something like Punch Out.
And I think one of the things that was really interesting was, one, we played the AI, and the AI mopped the floor with us every time.
Hey, I got close.
You got really
did
close.
significant. You were actually like, I would have said tied. However, they were very generous with the boxing scores, and the lowest we ever got in a round was 8.
I knocked him
Yeah.
down 3 times.
Yeah,
You did.
and that's why I think we're like 8 out of 10 is like, okay, he got an 8, but he got his ass whopped, and you
did.
just got a 10, and that's a difference of 2 points, which I do not feel was an appropriate difference between the performance of you and the AI.
I'd really never put
Thank you.
together exactly how boxing was scored until sort of looking at this game. It's like, okay, it's how many times you're throwing a punch and how many times they're landing. And then probably, I think they judge an overall style and stuff. Like,
Yeah.
Justin, you put it well. You said, like, you just assumed it was just, like, vibes.
It's vibe based.
It's
It
like-
seems like they're kicking ass.
Like, I don't know.
gets more points.
That guy's got a glint in his eye. I think it's his birthday. Let's give it to him, you know?
But after we didn't complete the first story mission, we then each of us tried. Although Steve went in with nothing, me and J Band.
Hey, I had heart.
Well, because there was a fail before us. If you fail it,
Yeah.
you get to do a little training session.
Oh, yeah.
Where they teach you how to attack. They don't teach you how to block, but they teach you all of the attacks.
This is fun, too,
And
because you
then-
get somebody doing a very silly Burgess Meredith impression.
Yeah.
Throw an uppercut, Rock!
And so me and J-Ban got that, which really prepared us more going into it. But then we started playing with each other. It was really interesting just seeing how, even between the three of us who don't really know what we're doing all that well, we had very different notable styles. Steve would get up in my face and punch the shit out of it.
Yeah.
I was going for
And
the
that was
body.
before I even started the game.
Yeah. I would go for the body and then mix in some uppercuts. And J-Ban, I think, was, other than use of blocking, which is, I think, probably one of the hardest parts of this game.
Yeah.
J-Ban was probably the most rounded.
We played a little bit of two modes. So there's a single player story mode where you sort of like walk through Rocky's career. Like your first fight is with Spider Rico, which is their first fight from
Can we
the
just
movie.
have a moment for like, isn't that just a great name? Spider Rico.
This series is so full of amazing names. That's why I was saying it's kind of like a combination of blue collar and mythical, because you get these very easily identifiable.
Apollo Creed.
Oh, next week we're going to be talking about a guy named Mason the Line Dixon. Like
Oh my god.
it's crazy. Like, and yeah, we get Clubber Lang, we get Ivan Drago, Thunderlips. We get all these guys. It's a lot of fun, and I think that's a really great thing that the Rocky series does. But like we start with the Spider Rico fight, and it takes you all the way through Rocky's and the end of Rocky's career at the end of Rocky 5.
And I want to throw in something that I noticed that was really interesting, and we definitely didn't touch on it much. Every time you do the training, you get to pick a stat to train.
Yeah.
And then you actually have stat points up to presumably 100, and you can train different things. So, for instance, you're playing Rocky.
Yeah.
Rocky has a mean punch. Like 40 strength, speed is like 26.
Sure. I mean,
like he's not fast, but man, can he throw down.
It's a smart approach, and it's an approach a lot of like boxing and wrestling games have taken before. You want to feel, but for a Rocky series in particular, like which is so based on these training montages where you see him like gradually grow stronger. It really ties in with the theme of it.
Absolutely.
We didn't get very far the single player mode.
No.
We switched over to the exhibition where we could fight, and I wish we'd gotten a little further because there's clearly like 30 characters we could unlock
Yeah,
here,
I know. I was
and
very tempted to. I was like, oh, is there like a special code we could put in?
There must be a code. Like we had 4 characters. It's like Rocky
3.
and then like 3 dildos. It's like that's it. Like we don't know who these guys are.
We had Rocky. We had Spider. What was his
Spider
name?
Rico.
Spider Rico.
And
And,
then,
we
like-
had this other guy like Jake or something.
Yeah, Jack and Biff. I don't know who
Jake
they
from
were.
State Farm. But there was only 3.
He can throw down.
I want to point out there was only 3. That 4th option was random.
Oh, okay.
Which is
yeah,
why I picked random, because I'm like,
who cares?
I don't want to
Yeah.
be the cliche who picks Rocky. Let's see what happens.
There's clearly a lot of fun characters to play with, but I had fun doing these exhibition modes.
Yeah.
Like I think, I'm like I said, I'm more used to playing like fighting games like your Mortal Kombat or Street Fighter or things like that, and this is
So,
not that. And once you wrap your head around that, you'll
I had
have
a
fun
lot
with
of
it.
fun, but it was the the controls were stiff.
Yeah.
And they weren't overly responsive. But again, it's early days.
Yeah.
But I had fun. I had a lot of fun
Yeah.
playing this game.
What
I
year
enjoyed it.
was this?
This was 2002 when
2002?
this came out. So the
Yeah.
Rocky series had been fully dead for more than a decade at this point.
Well, I was so pleased they got all the licensing.
They got a license. They got the music. They got clips from the movies. They got all the characters to come back. Like it's clearly made with like some love and affection. This
Yeah.
company, it's the producers of this. They're called Rage Newcastle. They're a British studio that had pretty much only done like soccer and rugby games that never came out in America. So they were a pretty new property, and it was a weird one to hand over to them. But I thought they did a good job. This is actually a really nice looking game for 2002. I thought they had some good lighting effects and some nice hefty character models.
Good blood spray.
Good blood spray. The blood spray would like stay on the canvas like after you like nailed a couple of good hits. Like I like that attention to detail in a game from like a first round Xbox game. That's pretty cool. Overall, I think I enjoyed this game a lot. I had a good time with it. I have the sequel as well. It's called Rocky Legends. It came out a year after this. And the big difference in that one is that now in career mode, you can choose to follow either Rocky, Clubber Lang, Apollo Creed, or Ivan Drago. And it's interesting because it gives you character backstories for those characters that you don't get anywhere else. Like, so it tells you how Ivan Drago came up through the USSR and stuff like that.
And I think this kind of, my opinion on this will go back to what we were talking about before, which is like, I have never watched a boxing match. I'm not really interested in watching a boxing match. I've played boxing games before and had a blast doing it. Once it's a game and it's not a real person, I'm like, oh, hell yeah, let's go.
Yeah.
I've played wrestling games. I've played MMA games. And honestly, this one stood up pretty well,
It's not
especially
bad.
for a game from 2002 that wasn't like, you know, a mainstream hit or whatever.
And there may be fans of like, you know, so EA's Knockout Kings is kind of like the established boxing franchise. And I don't think they've made one of those since like 2004 or something like that. So that's a pretty dead genre in itself. And people who may be fans of that, they may say like it's more technically accurate or more fun or whatever. But I thought this was really solid.
No, I think there was just the slightest amount of like, I wouldn't even say clunk to it, but it played.
There's a learning curve.
Yeah, it played well, and just like all boxing games, there's that learning curve off the bat of where like you're not gonna jump into that first match and win. You're
and
gonna
I think that
have to learn.
like comparing to something like a Mortal Kombat, where these are martial artists and they're super fast, like not all boxers are fast.
No.
Some of them are just really solid, and some
Yeah,
of them
there's tanks. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I thought it did an interesting job of actually slowing down the game in a way that's both frustrating and kind of legitimate.
Yeah, the only thing that I wish that they would have done was also, and maybe it's there. Each time we did the training thing, we hit strength, and we just kept doing more strength.
He was getting buff
and so
by the end of that.
it's possible that if you do the other stats, you get a different training mini game that teaches you how to defend and move around and stuff. Which would have been sweet.
And I love mini games, you know that.
You love mini games,
And so I was digging the mini games.
Yeah, and that's one of the things, because like I used to play a lot of sports games. I don't watch basketball. I don't watch baseball. I don't watch football.
Yeah.
I've played all the games at some point, and they often had that kind of career mode of like you create a character and then you get to do different trainings, and there's maybe like a little mini game associated with it.
Yeah.
So that you actually have control over how your player develops. And I always like when there's that little element of like, okay,
We're back on. Sorry, the battery on our recorder died, so I'm going to be splicing this together. We may not have an exact lead through of what we were talking about. But do you remember what you were talking? You were saying something.
Yeah, I was saying that I always liked in games where you had that opportunity to do some customization, even if the game clearly has like, you know, you start as Rocky, your stats are set up like Rocky.
Yeah.
It's probably not the most effective to change it if you want to change the way you're playing, but you have that option if you want to.
Yeah.
Instead of the game just like forcing you down one particular path, each fight gets you, the same stats go up the same amounts or like relative to how well you did. It gives you options to really change things up, especially since you don't get to pick what character you play as. Obviously, this is Rocky.
Yeah.
Like you said, the next one they did make that a thing, but I wouldn't go into a Rocky game expecting that as a feature.
No, not necessarily, but it's nice to have it here.
Yeah, it's nice to have that option.
Well, I think that's a good time to segue over to our rankings for this episode. Do we think Rocky is a good movie, good game, bad movie, bad game, or somewhere in between? J-Ban, why don't you start us off?
It's great, classic. It's such an amazing film. I love this movie. I love the romance in it, even though it's got some 70s issues. I love Adrian. I love Rocky. I love the real lived in personal experience of being in Philadelphia at during the 70s, which was very sort of grungy.
Yeah.
And I was just it's such a perfect movie that it's one of those things that you're you can't believe someone came up with because it's so perfect. It's you can't believe that this hasn't been around for 100 years.
Yeah.
But no, Sylvester Stallone wrote it, and it, like, I sometimes wonder. My biggest what ifs is like, what if Sylvester Stallone didn't get to star in this, and what if we just had a world where he just had screenplay, like he was just a screenwriter?
It's interesting to think of.
Burt
Yeah.
Reynolds starred in 9 Rocky movies.
Man, Burt Reynolds in this movie would have been a disaster,
It would've-
especially in
Yeah.
'76. He's so checked out.
It would
and
have been
so, like,
absolutely
yeah.
a different movie. What was the budget?
And
like $6 million. It was low. It was modest.
It was no. The budget was $1 million, and that year it made $225 million.
Oh damn. Okay.
It was the best-selling movie of that year.
Yeah, highest grossing. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
Which is
yeah.
one of the things that frustrates me so much about modern filmmaking is that the big production houses all want to play safe, and they go with things that they know is going to make money.
Yeah.
But then they spend, hundreds of thousands of dollars on a movie that might even still flop,
Yeah.
as opposed to just
hundreds of
Well, I
millions.
feel like
not
that's
hundreds.
why
Yeah.
A24 is doing so well.
Yes,
Yeah.
as
because it's-
opposed to taking a smaller budget
Yeah.
and making a movie that's taking more of a risk, because then that's when you get those heavily
Yeah.
lopsided numbers.
Well, and to finish my ranking, I really like the video games. I've had a really good time, and I would definitely play more of these, even though my thumb is tiny and the Xbox controller is huge. I think one time, like when I was younger, I got the kids, like there was a kids version of the Xbox controller.
it was probably like
Well,
a Mad Catz or something.
Yeah.
It
one
could
of the
be
third parties.
I think we're playing there were 2 controllers like released standard with the original Xbox. The original one, which fans called
God.
the Duke,
yes.
was obscenely big with buttons that were way too close together. It was almost an unusable controller. So this is the better one.
The
but it
better
is still
first party.
It is a good controller. It's always felt a little soft to me. Like the buttons don't
Yeah.
feel as responsive as like a PlayStation controller.
But I'll
that's-
say that this was probably at or very close to the heyday of third-party controllers.
Yeah, for sure.
And so many different manufacturers made so many controllers.
Yeah, I would
And
doubt
a
it.
lot of them sold because they found those things of like making it closer to what we know now as an Xbox controller, which fits very well for most people.
Yeah.
As opposed to that controller, which was a thing. Also, the location of the start button back and then the black and white buttons were
It was awkward.
so
They
weird.
figured it out.
So weird.
What was the first controller that had a trigger button?
Oh, PlayStation?
I know the
No.
PS1.
Yeah,
but
PS1
might have
had the little
been
ones. The Saturn had it.
The Saturn. Saturn was right after.
Saturn was
PlayStation 1,
96.
right?
PlayStation came out in Japan in 94.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it was PlayStation. I believe so. I could be wrong about that.
Yeah,
I've got
and,
I've got a poster of controllers in the other
There
room.
absolutely was accessories for like PC and other that were like joysticks.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Stuff for like flying games and stuff.
The weirdest
that
controller.
might
This is a total
trigger
diatribe, but
be
the
that.
weirdest controller ever made was for a system called the Fairchild Channel F.
Yeah.
Look this up. The
Instead
controller,
of channel 3, you went to
it's
channel F.
F. The controller is it's like a plunger. It's like a dynamite plunger that you pull up and down.
Okay, what was this thing?
It's called the Fairchild Channel F. It was a failed Atari knockoff. It was still one of the weirdest controllers of all time. My buddy Woody had one, and I that's the only time I've ever seen one in person. But yeah, absolutely bizarre controller that like you use it like for Pac-Man style games. Like you pull up if you want to go left or right. Like yeah,
Absolutely looks like a studio microphone that just has like the tiniest stand ever.
Yeah, a little bit. It's a really weird controller. Like it's very strange. Justin, where do you come down in rankings for this movie and game?
I think it was a great movie, and I think it was a good game.
Good.
It honestly makes me want to go home and look up like a modern boxing game.
Hell yeah. Yeah, I don't know
because-
what the most recent boxing game is because Knockout Kings became Fight Night and then
So
they've
I-
stopped.
Like, I think there's a new MMA game every year.
That's the thing. It's MMA.
And
MMA is not the same
that
thing.
MMA is
today.
definitely taken the popularity, but I wouldn't be surprised if somebody had licensing for
I wouldn't
the
doubt
major
it.
boxing
It's probably
promotions
EA.
and stuff.
I'm sure it's EA.
Probably unfortunately EA.
But,
yeah, no, it
yeah.
was like I said, it felt like those boxing games that I had played. It was fun, felt realistic enough. It wasn't like it felt down to earth.
Yeah.
It didn't feel like anything crazy. You weren't super powered or anything. So.
Well, I'm coming down the same on all of these. I love this movie, and I think these games are totally solid, really respectable versions of boxing simulators. And like all the games we're going to be playing in the series, this one really has a lot of reverence for the Rocky series as a whole. And we'll get into that a little bit more next week because we're talking about the next movie in the Rocky series. We're jumping over the entire 80s and the 90s, jumping 20 years from 1976 to 2006 for Rocky Balboa, the big comeback movie.
30 years.
Oh, excuse me, 30 years. I'm so sorry. Yeah, I can do math. Yeah, quite a big leap. We're jumping ahead and going to Rocky Balboa, sort of the comeback story of this movie.
So what in the timeline of movies, is this a remake? Is this?
It's a sequel. It's a
sequel.
It's a canonical sequel. Yeah.
Number 9.
It's number 6.
Number 6.
Yeah, it's number
okay.
6. Yeah.
Gotcha. I was just like, are we gonna see like an origin story? Gotcha. Okay.
No. Yeah. It stays pretty like even through the creeds. The creeds are all part of this same continuity. So we'll get into all that. But
Gotcha.
Tune in next week. We'll be talking more about Rocky with Rocky Balboa. You can find us at cinemarcadepodcast@gmail.com. Our social media podcasts are cinemarcade_podcasts. I have another show out there called Puppet Masters Castle Freaks. It's all about horror movies. Definitely check that out. All of us are doing lots of theater stuff here in the local Austin comedy scene. So check us out at the Hideout Theater, Fallout Theater, Cold Town Theater. We're all at one of those places at one point or another. Support local comedy. I realize I've not been plugging things at the end of this show lately, so I'm going to start doing that a little bit more.
And that's something, absolutely support local comedy, support local theater. Sometimes that's going to be
support
the
local
best,
boxing.
most fun stuff.
Yeah.
Boxing if you want to.
Sure. But we'll see you next week. Rocky Balboa. Ding, ding, ding. Gotta fly now.